most uncomfortable are saints. Even with Christian, I mean, that's why we have all discussions there, but. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. Right, it's like, I don't know, it's just wrong.
So the one on the left is 3/4, and the one on the right is midway. The microphone is off, yeah?
and get across streets and have the fans on. It's really muggy.
It's really,
Like really muggy.
Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vasai Budaleshni Mati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gauravani Patroni Nivasesa Sanyavadi Paskatyade Satarana. Well, so much for we're only going to have light rain today. Okay. So welcome to our next session. We're going to be combining lessons 2 and 3 here today. So we talked about this morning finding our nature in terms of our prosperity types. And now we're going to talk about finding our nature in terms of the 4 fields of work. And again, if you want any more information, if you want us to let you know when our full online course is ready, the audio book, anything else that's exciting, our workbook that we're starting on, you can just sign up here. And we will send you that info. Or you can write this down if you want. All right. Or if you don't have your phone with you and you just want to write this down and do it later. Okay, so again, we're going to be combining lessons 2 and 3. Lesson 2 is about the nature of the 4 fields. So you can think of that as the 4 containers. So this goes with identifying our prosperity type and career field, and principle 1, connecting our nature with our livelihood. So I'm sure that many of you are familiar with this verse, where Krishna says that all of the hundreds of thousands of careers in the world can be divided into 4 categories. And I'd like to ask all of you who are familiar with the Sanskrit words for these 4 categories to please forget that you have that familiarity. I'd like you to forget that you know those Sanskrit words, because we often have a lot of misconceptions and prejudices that are associated with them. So I'd like you for at least a week, just forget you know those. So we can ask why in the Vedic wisdom literature like the Bhagavad Gita, the Bhagavad Purana, why are all the hundreds of thousands of careers divided into these 4 fields? Now my co-author, Dr. Ruchira Datta, and I have decided to use English terms for these: artistry, ideas, resources, and government. And I'm sure these are not perfect words, but we tried to find something that would really encapsulate what these fields represent. So why these fields? Well, first of all, specific careers are always changing. Just like there were no software engineers 200 years ago, and right now there aren't very many blacksmiths. So if you're looking for specific careers, that's going to come and go. But these 4 fields are stable. They always exist in human society, except for the most simple society. So once you know your field, you can always find some work within that field. As far as specificity within the field, then you would look at what we talked about this morning with the prosperity types. But the main reason that work is divided into these 4 fields is because each of them has a Dharma that is different from the others and mutually exclusive with the others. So I'm sure many of you noticed this morning that you had 2 or 3 prosperity types that were really important to you. And some people think that they have more than one field, but that's not possible because these dharmas, again, are mutually exclusive, and therefore if you were in more than one field, you'd be at war with yourself. Now, you might be in one field that particularly assists another field. Like you might be in resources, particularly assisting government, or you might be in ideas, particularly assisting artistry, or you might be in artistry, particularly assisting resources. And in that way, it might feel like, well, maybe I'm working in more than one field, but our basic Dharma is always in one field. Okay. So as we look at these different fields, we're going to be asking what possible careers are in these fields, and we're also going to be discussing for each field what are the prejudices or criticisms that people have about the field. So for each field, we're first going to do the lesson 2, which is the definition of the field itself. And then we're going to switch to our lesson 3 work, which is looking at the temperament of the people within the field. So again, you can think of it as 4 containers. What's their nature? And then what kind of people are going to fit in each of them. So the temperament is related to principle 2. Advancing through life while nourishing our nature. Trying to understand, where do I fit? Where do I belong? What is my temperament? One of our readers told me, one of our test readers told me, that she felt one of the most valuable things in our book was to differentiate between people who already have the dharmic expertise of a field and someone who has a beginning inclination for that field that's not yet an expert. Think of that as the difference between a beginning saxophone player and an expert saxophone player. Just like one of my grandsons is learning the saxophone, and when he was first learning, they had a teacher come to the house, and while I was visiting, and my kid said, His saxophone teacher is coming. You should go in the room where you're staying and close the door and maybe put on some earplugs. And when I came back a year later, I went to one of his performances. So the inclination for a field is something like this. And you'll see any slides that have to do with inclination have that little box in the corner of a child learning how to walk. The dharmic expertise of a field is something more like this. I want to remind everybody that there's 3 kinds of expertise in any career. To be expert in the information or the knowledge you need to do the work, to be expert in the skills of the work, and to be expert in the Dharma of the work. Now you can go to thousands of places in the world to learn the information and skills needed for a particular career. But what we can learn specifically from the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavad Purana are these 4 types of Dharma. So again, when we're going to look at the temperament, we're going to look at beginning, initial temperament, and then we're also going to look at those who have expertise in the Dharma. Okay, first we're going to start with the field of artistry. And first we're going to look at the container. What is the nature of the field of artistry? So artistry provides all of the flavor, all of the pleasure in society. Without the work done in this field, society would be dry. Think about like plain rice, no salt, no flavor. It sort of tastes like solidified air, right? So that's what life would be like without the field of artistry. Metaphorically, they're adding all the salt and the spices to life. This is the field of pleasure. This field also provides all of the functionality and support in society. Without this field, nothing works. I once stayed in an ashram where we had nobody there who was in the field of artistry, and people talked about, they had nice kirtans and they talked about the Bhagavad Gita, but none of the toilets flushed properly and the windows were broken. So this is the field that makes everything work. This is also the field that produces beauty for the society. So this is a field that makes society full of pleasure, full of beauty, and full of functionality. In the whole universe, this field is considered, if you take the universe as the body of the divine, this field is considered to be the legs of that divine body. And it's interesting that in the Bhagavad Purana in 2.10.25, it says that Krishna himself directly supervises the work of this field because it's so important to achieving all of the goals of life. By the work in this field, everything else can be accomplished. On a subtle level in the universal body, this field is related to the Muladhara chakra, functionality, and to the Swadhisthana chakra of pleasure. Now, many people have hobbies that are similar to work in the field of artistry because artistry is the field of pleasure. So for many of us, we might not have artistry as our livelihood, but we might like to, maybe we like to finish furniture in our spare time or do some embroidery or work in a garden, but that's different from wanting it as your livelihood. So this field is for people who like to do that as the main thing they do all day in order to serve others. All right, so I'd like to now ask you, and by the way, getting wrong answers here is just as helpful as getting right answers. Can we learn as much by knowing what something is not by what something is? Okay, so I always get a bunch of wrong answers here, and that's actually good. It helps illuminate things. Okay, I'd like you to try and figure out what careers do you think might be in the field of artistry? Yes. Gardening, yes, if you're a landscape gardener. Now again, not gardening as a hobby. If you just have your own little garden and you're not using that to make your livelihood, that's just a hobby, right? But if you're actually a gardener and you work for other people, And you do landscaping, yes. Enthusiastic children are fine as long as they're not screaming. Okay? Enthusiasm is fine. Screaming is not. Okay, any other ideas of careers in this field? Most musicians, not all, the vast majority of musicians, yes. Yes. Cooking, yes. Chefs, yes. Making garlands. Yeah, not very many people do that as a livelihood. But you could say florists. Yeah, I think people making garlands as a livelihood are probably just like in a place like Hawaii, where it's actually a livelihood. But anyone who's working with flower design, yes, a florist. Yes. What? Carpenters, yes. Yes? Architecture, yes. Yes? Most dancers, not all, but the vast majority, yes. Explorer? Sports, yes. So all professional athletes, correct, yes. Admin? Explain. Okay, if you're like, if you're an admin in the sense that you're a secretary or a personal assistant, yes. Yes? Housekeeping, yes. Cleaners, people who clean homes, hotels, businesses, yes. Yes. Yoga teachers. Yoga teachers, if all they're teaching is the physical asanas. But if they're actually teaching more the science of yoga and how to be healthy, and then no. But if all they're teaching you is just how to do exercise, then yes. Almost all actors. A few not, but almost all actors. Yeah? Hmm? Oh, we'll get there. Don't worry. Yeah? Painters, yes. Now, house painters, all house painters, if they're fine artists, most, yes, not all. Magicians. Whoa. I've been teaching this all over the world. That's the first time someone said a magician. Yes. Magicians, entertainers, most comedians, not all, but the vast majority of comedians, yes. Taxi drivers, yes. Taxi drivers, bus drivers, and pilots, airplane pilots, like a big airborne bus. Actors, almost all actors, not all, but almost all. Gymnasts, yes, they're like professional athletes, correct. Cleaners, yes. Okay. Now, what are the criticisms that people sometimes make about people who have these sorts of jobs or about these sorts of jobs? That they shouldn't have it as a... Oh, okay. So for some of these careers, people will say, well, that's not really worthy of a career. They'll say, just have it as a hobby, right? But you can't have it as a career, okay? It's interesting to say that because this is a field that produces pleasure, it's also a field where it's very easy for people to flow into the work they're doing. And so that may be a criticism that they flow too much into the work that they're doing. I like that. Okay. What other criticisms might people have? Yeah? Yes. So often it's assumed that these are jobs that don't require as much intelligence, although all engineers are in this field. And to be a civil engineer or a software engineer, an electrical engineer, you certainly have to be very intelligent and have a lot of education. So there's a lot of careers in this field that do require a lot of intelligence and or education, but there is kind of a prejudice that, well, you know, these are just kind of the lower status sorts of jobs. And it's sad when people think like that, because without these jobs, nothing would work and nothing would be beautiful and nothing would be pleasurable in the world. Okay. Now we're going to look at the temperament of people in the field of artistry. So this is people who love to play with beauty and function. That's their enjoyment. Now, of course, when we're children, we often like to color and build things and make things as a way of learning. And so again, it may be a little hard to point out what is the difference, but someone for whom that is really their love. You know, I cleaned that, I made that, I fixed that. Now again, we all like making things and fixing things or cleaning things, but here is where that's really a person's being. I cleaned that, I made that, I fixed that, I created that. And especially having the mood of wanting to do this for someone else. So this attitude became very clear to me when I visited some people in St. Petersburg in Russia. And in their home, they had about 15 original oil paintings. Now, I have a number of those same paintings as electronic files on my computer, and my daughter really likes that artist, and so she has a number of prints of her work up on her wall. But seeing the originals was just astonishing. You know, some artists with oil paint use a lot of texture in the paint. You've seen that? Like each of the pearls that she painted for Krishna were like little round balls of paint on the canvas, and she also mixed a lot of sparkles in with the paint. And so the originals were a completely different experience. I was just mesmerized going through this house. And then it struck me, wow, this artist spends, I don't know, weeks, months on each painting that she'll never see again. It hangs in someone else's house. All she can get for herself is a print or an electronic file. And I thought, wow, I wouldn't do that. It just struck me, this deep service attitude. So the inclination you're going to see for this field is this service attitude. Now, those of you very familiar with Bhakti Yoga will know that this service attitude is one of the hallmarks of Bhakti, where we're feeling, my happiness is in pleasing Krishna. My happiness is in pleasing the saintly persons. I'm getting vicarious happiness, as Srila Prabhupada would say, through Krishna. So this is the hallmark of the inclination for the field of artistry. Liking to make things, build things, do things, work with tools, use your body as a tool in order to give pleasure to others. Right now we're going to look at the dharmic expertise of the field of artistry. So the Bhagavad Purana says that those in this field are honest. Now, it's a particular type of honesty that's found in those who have dharmic expertise in this field. For example, in America, I have a greenhouse at the temple that I manage, where we keep the Tulsi plant, and we wanted to put in a heater for the winter there that didn't use any electricity. So if there was a power out, all our plants wouldn't die. So I contacted an HVAC guy, and I said, look, I want to get a propane heater that doesn't use any electricity and that's vented to the outside. It doesn't put any gases into the greenhouse. Right? So he took a whole lot of work to find a good heater. He did a whole lot of research. And then when he actually installed it, what he bills me for the price he paid for the heater. In fact, he even gives me the receipt from the store from which he bought it. And then he bills me for his labor separately. Now, you contrast that if you're going to go buy a heater from a business, they don't tell you what they paid for it, right? You know that the price on that heater represents their price plus profit. And if they told you what their profit margin was, you probably wouldn't buy anything from them. You with me? Or in a business, do you consider that advertising you get from a business is going to be completely honest? Right? We assume it's not honest. When we were in India, my grandson and I saw all these advertisements for construction steel rods in Mayapur because there's a lot of building construction going on. And the advertisements, they always show this extremely handsome man with this extremely beautiful woman looking at each other with the pipes, you know. And so we were saying, buy our steel pipe and you will get an extremely attractive romantic partner. Right? But people in the field of artistry don't do that kind of thing. Like he said, okay, I found these 3 heaters, and this one does this, and this one does this, and this one does this, and this is how much they cost. So you have this kind of honesty. It's also a field of satisfaction. The dharmic expertise of people in this field is they are not money-minded or profit-minded. They want to be paid a fair price for their goods or services, and they want to be treated with dignity, but they're basically satisfied people. I mean, I also saw this with my HVAC man, where he said, should I bill you or the temple? I said, well, bill me, because I've been the one collecting donations for this. And he said, oh, in that case, I'll also give a donation. I'll take $100 off the price as my donation. So that is this mood of satisfaction. The people who have the dharmic expertise of this field, they're satisfied if they have a comfortable place to live, nice food to eat, nice clothes to wear, loving family, if they can actually engage in their craft with expertise, and if people compensate them fairly and treat them with dignity. You were talking about being too much absorbed. One of the hallmarks of any time we're doing our own work is that we go into a state of flow and absorption. But that is perhaps particularly true in the field of artistry. And the Bhagavad Purana 11.9.13 says that there was once a maker of arrows who was so absorbed in making his arrow completely straight that he did not notice the sound and color of the king going by with his retinue. That is a hallmark of being in a state of flow. And it is particularly found for those in the field of artistry. Now, those in the field of artistry also really want to please their customer or their client. Such a thing is very important to understand, whether we're in this field or not, whenever we deal with someone who is in artistry. People sometimes think that, you know, the person who serves me my meals at a restaurant or cleans my house or puts in my plumbing, they're going to be satisfied just if I pay them fairly. That's not true. What really gives them life is that the customer or the client is pleased with them. And it can be a very, very simple thing. You know, wow, thank you for doing such a good job cleaning the kitchen. Or even like, you know, I'll walk through a shop where someone's cleaning the floor, or an airport where someone's cleaning. I'll say, thank you for making the world more beautiful. Or thank you for making the world work. And I find they'll just light up like a million suns. So that's the dharmic expertise of this field. Those who have dharmic expertise in the field of artistry are willing to sacrifice for the integrity and the quality of their craft or service, even when they're being pressured to make more profit or work faster. So if someone's pressuring them, okay, we've got to be expedient here, we've got to work faster, we've got to make more money, they'll go, no, I'm going to have quality and integrity in my work. As I think I mentioned yesterday, I saw a sign up by a restaurant that say, we make our sandwiches slowly and carefully. If you want fast food, there's another shop down the street. So that's the basic dharma of this field. And the questions that they ask about their work are, is it supportive and is it beautiful? Okay, any questions or discussions about the field of artistry? Yes. Excellent question. So nurses are in artistry, except now they have some nurse practitioners that act like doctors. But general nurses are in artistry. Surgeons and dentists are usually considered in artistry because they're kind of like carpenters and plumbers. But in general, doctors are not in this field. So doctors in general are not in artistry. And the same with anyone in the health profession who's doing more than just mechanical things is not in this field. Not in this field. Huh? teachers not in this field unless they're just teaching you how to ice a cake. You know, there might be someone who has a job as a plumber, and then they also train an apprentice, but they're not a teacher by profession. Occupational therapists, it depends. You know, physical therapists, occupational therapists. If all they're doing is teaching you an exercises, yes. If they're actually training you and giving you guidance about your health in general and giving you wisdom how to deal with your health, then no, they're not in this field. If they're babysitting, yes. If they're teaching children, no. Like let's say you're actually, you know, like a preschool teacher or a kindergarten teacher, and you have all these activities for the kids, and you have learning objectives, then you're not in this field. Okay. But if you're just making sure that the kids get something to eat and get to bed on time and they get a bath, you know, or like I knew someone who did after-school care, and they were actually told, you're not supposed to be teaching the kids anything. You're just supposed to be taking care of them. Now, I suppose everybody is always teaching somebody something by their behavior, but we're talking about if you're doing explicit direct teaching, that's not in this field. Not if that's your profession. Again, you know, like I have a granddaughter who's in this field. She's expert in fine arts. She's also an expert carpenter. And she teaches a high school class once a week at the local school in art. But she's not a teacher. She's in artistry, and she does a little bit of teaching on the side.
Thank you.
Yes? It's actually hard with the rain and stuff to hear. If you could use the mic, that would be great.
So would the same apply to like disability support work?
Disability support, like, are they making sure you're getting your government benefits? Or are they training you, like, how to use equipment to help with your disability? Are they like physical therapists, or are they making sure you get your benefits?
More just on a day-to-day life basis, making sure you're okay and
Like
taken
home
care
care.
of. Yeah.
Home care is in this field, yes.
But if you were in like the management of that, would it be different?
If you're in the management, no.
Okay.
If you're running it as a business, no. Unless it's very, 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 very small. Like, let's say you have a home care business and it's just 2 or 3 people, then yes. Just like I have a place in India in a little town named Govardhan, and there's a man there who fixes, I don't know what you call them here. Do you call them flip-flops? Do you know what I'm talking about? Slippers, maybe, do you call them? What do you call them? Thongs, okay. Like those little, you know, sandals that are made out of like plastic or rubber kind of thing. What? You don't call them, Australians don't call them chappals. We're in Australia. This guy calls them chappals in Hindi, yeah. Okay, so he fixes these thongs, flip-flops, sandals, whatever you want to call them. In India, they're usually made out of like rubber or plastic. And his whole shop is a piece of cardboard in a little toolbox. And he sets his own hours. So he's not really a business person. You follow? So he's in this field of artistry. So same as, like, let's say you're a cake maker and you have a little shop where you make cakes. And maybe you even employ a few people. But your purpose is beauty and support. Your purpose isn't business and profit. Is this clear? Yeah? Any other questions about artistry? Let's go on to the field of government. Oh, we should also mention that artistry is the most concrete of the 4 fields. So I've listed the 4 fields on the whiteboard and going from the most concrete to the most abstract. And what we mean here by concrete and abstract is what is good work in that field and what is a good worker in that field. So artistry is the most concrete because, well, is this a chair or is it not a chair? It's extremely concrete. And are you a good worker to make a chair is also extremely concrete. Okay, let's go to the field of government. So as soon as human society gets more than very, very, very simple, you need some kind of an organization. You need somebody to make rules. You need somebody to enforce rules. You need somebody to protect from internal and external threat. You need somebody to make sure that people have what they need that they can't provide for themselves. Just like we're not going to each make a little piece of the road in front of our house. You know, we need government to make the whole road. We need government to make sure that everybody has water and everybody has electricity and so forth. Now, there's quite a difference between being in government and, say, managing a business. So a business is just responsible for a particular domain, a particular area, whereas government is responsible for everyone in that domain. So this is the second most abstract field, because what makes a good government is hard to define, isn't it? There's so many different kinds of government in the world. You have direct democracy or parliamentary democracy, you have socialists. What's a good government? Well, different people are going to give you very different answers, as opposed to like, what's a good chair? You know, is it a chair or not? And how to become trained in being good in the field of government is also more abstract. Now, we might think this field applies only to political governments. And if you look in the Bhagavad Purana, there's really only two categories for this field: political governments that get their money from taxation or fees or fines, and landlords who get their money from rent, and who basically have like a little kingdom of their apartment complex. And the Bhagavad Purana, it says that people in the field of government do not make their money from charity. However, in 2024, that is not the case. So we have organizations that we ironically call NGOs, non-government organizations, who do the work of government. This has basically come to pass because many governments have gaps in their areas of service for the population, where some nonprofit that exists on charity comes in to fill the gap, correct? This is especially true, of course, in the more developing world. So these NGOs, ironically called NGOs, are still working in the field of government. They're providing roads, they're providing sanitation, they're providing maybe even sometimes protection and education and so forth. There are also government-type organizations such as NATO and Interpol and the United Nations that aren't exactly a state, but that are doing government-type work. Now, the field of government provides the leadership for society in general. However, there are leaders in all four fields. So it's not that anyone who's a leader is in government. That's not a fact. And it's not that every single person in government is a leader, but the field of government provides the leadership for society. Can you understand like what the difference might be? Yeah. You can be a leader in artistry. Just like I met one gentleman, I think it was in Dubai. I said, "What do you do for your living?" And he said, "I'm a project manager." I said, "Well, what kind of projects do you manage?" He said, "When a business gets a new place or is renovating, they hire me and I bring together a team of electricians and a team of plumbers and a team of interior designers," and there were 2 or 3 other teams, "and then I'm managing the team leaders that are managing the teams." And I said, "Are you trying to please the customer and the client?" He said, "Oh, definitely. They're telling what should be there, and then we do all of that." I said, "Okay, that's a leader in artistry." Similarly, there are leaders in resources and there are leaders in ideas. But the field of government provides the leadership for society in general, and most of the people working in that field have a little bit of an aura of leadership. Now, in the body of the universe, this field is considered to be the arms. Of course, in English, the word arms means not only this physical appendage, but also weapons. Right? We talk about arms dealers. It doesn't mean they're selling body parts. Right? Or are you armed means does you have a weapon. But arms also provide care. Now, the field of artistry serves people directly like an assistant, and the field of government serves people directly like a parent. They're using their arms for protection and care. And in the subtle body of the universe, therefore, they are the anahata, or the heart chakra. Okay, some ideas of what careers are in the field of government. Yes. Social worker, yes. Now, in America at least, some people with a social work degree act like psychologists. But if a social worker is making sure that people get their government benefits, that neglected children are taken care of and things like that, then yes. Yes.
Mayor?
A mayor, a governor, prime minister, president, yes. Yes, city council, yes. Don't worry about either obvious or wrong. Yes.
Just a practical thing, because it's being recorded and people watching. But before you speak, can you just take my...
I also will repeat. The main reason to take the microphone is it's sometimes hard for me to hear with the rain. So sometimes I can't hear what you're saying. Anything else? What else is in the field of government? Yeah? Military. So not the cooks in the military, but yes, in all the branches in the military and anyone who's a military person. Yes. Yes. Bankers, no. We like wrong answers. Again, knowing what something is not is just as important as knowing what it is. Yes. Lawyers, yes. President of an organization? Well, it depends what's the organization doing. What kind of services? See, just because you're a leader doesn't make you in the field of government. Now, you can be the president of an organization or the president of a business and you're not in the field of government. Yes. Realtors. No. Yes. If you're running a charity that does government type work, then yes. Let's say you're providing disaster relief. You know, you're feeding homeless people. You're taking care of endangered animals. That's all the kind of work that a political government should be doing. But again, because at the modern time, political governments may have gaps in their coverage, then there's charity works that do that. Now, there are other charities that do completely different things that wouldn't, so it's not that every charitable organization is in the field of government. But charitable organizations that do the kind of work that governments should be doing, yes. Yes. No. So people who are just accountants are in artistry. Statisticians are in another field. Now, let's say you're working for the taxation department of the government as an accountant, you are in artistry assisting government, but you're not actually doing government work yourself. Can you see that difference? Yeah, okay. Journalists. Journalists are generally in another field. Now, some journalists are in artistry. Like if you're doing the gossip column. But other journalists are in another field. If you have a so-called journalist who's in government, they're a propagandist, not a journalist. So people writing government propaganda, they're in government. But that's not journalism per se. You understand? University? Definitely not in this field. And in fact, if you had that mix, you'd really have a problem, as we'll see tomorrow. Yes. Police, yes. Diplomats, excellent. Yeah. Judges, yes. Yeah? People who work in the Foreign Affairs Office, yes. Entrepreneurs, no, another field. Yeah? Politicians, but you have to be specific. So like prime ministers, presidents, mayors, governors, people who work in the legislature, you know, someone who's, I don't know what you call them here, but we have like congresspersons and senators and, yeah? Yes, military personnel, correct. Now, if you're a lobbyist as an occupation, depends. Like you might be a lobbyist working for businesses. Hmm? No. No. Now, the career that epitomizes this field is a firefighter. So if you want to get a picture of the kind of personality type that epitomizes this field, would be a firefighter. What types of criticisms do people sometimes have of this field or the work of this field? Yeah? Egotistical, yeah, okay. And, because this is the field that's providing leadership for society, they're the leaders of society, so sometimes they're seen as being egotistical. Yes, yes. Untrainable? Untruthful, yes, because this is actually a field of diplomacy. This is a field of diplomacy. You don't want the people in this field to be entirely truthful. Otherwise, they'll start a war. Now, this is a field of diplomacy, and therefore, sometimes they're accused of, well, you guys can't be trusted, because they have to be diplomatic. Yes, yes. Abuse of power. Well, interesting, because anybody can abuse their power, but I think that's particularly a criticism levied at this field because these people hold the most power in society. And we need them to hold power in society, and so people tend to be most suspicious that perhaps they're abusing it. Executors of orders? Like blind executors of orders? Yeah, sometimes. Sometimes, especially in the military, because such a thing has to be done to some extent, actually. You can't have every single soldier in the middle of a battle trying to figure out what to do. But yeah. All right. I think also sometimes these people are criticized for being too bossy or controlling, because that's their job, to be the controllers of society. All right, we're going to go on to the inclination or the temperament of the people in this field. So right now we're looking at beginning inclination or temperament. So these are people really interested in fairness, justice, rules, morals, and ethics. Now most kids will say, that's not fair. But these are people it's their main concern that things should be fair, that people should follow the rules, that everybody should be treated fairly, that there should be justice. Sometimes these people have somewhat of what we would call a tough skin, that they're not so much affected by criticism. They may have a mood of kind of a take charge mentality. They tend to be aware of the movements or flows among human society. Sometimes they may fight or argue easily, especially over principles. Looking now at the dharmic expertise of this field. So those who have dharmic expertise in this field, they're intuitively aware of the flows of human society in whatever area they're governed. So my grandson-in-law is in this field of government. He used to be in the Marines. Now he's a security officer for various businesses. And he was giving a seminar to our Krishna community in America on situational awareness. And he was describing how he could pretty much spot anyone who came in the store who was trying to steal something, just by the way they were behaving, their facial expressions, how they moved down the aisles. So this kind of intuitive awareness of how human beings are flowing and how to increase the happiness and prosperity of the people in their domain. So the Bhagavad Gita lists the dharmic expertise in this field as heroism, power, determination, resourcefulness, courage in battle, generosity, and leadership. And the Bhagavad Purana says dynamic power, determination, heroism, tolerance, generosity. Please remember generosity. That will be important tomorrow when we look at crossing between fields. Tolerance, great endeavor, and steadiness. Now, these are people who generally try to avoid a crisis. They try to keep people safe. As my grandson-in-law said, it's not how many lions you've killed, it's how many lions you prevented from going into the village. So that's the whole idea of being a diplomat. Right? You're trying to prevent crisis. However, if there is a crisis, these people are energized by crisis. So in the Bhagavad Gita, we have the famous warrior Arjuna. He had a son named Abhimanyu. Manyu means danger. Abhi means toward. Abhimanyu means one who runs toward danger. So that's why the firefighter really epitomizes this field. Everyone else is running out of the burning building, they're going in. Right? There's some criminal with a gun in a building. The people in this field are going in. They're energized by crisis. They're generally tolerant and peaceful. They may be very good at mediation, at negotiation, to avoid crisis, but when it happens without them looking for it, they're happy and they're energized by it. I was speaking to one gentleman in India who said, I knew when I was young I wasn't in this field because I was in a protest march, and when the police officers came out, I immediately ran away. The people in this field tend to have a kind of charisma about them that commands respect, even just your ordinary police officer. People tend to trust them and follow them. And again, the people who have dharmic expertise in this field, they will only use force and power when all other means fail. They generally have a tolerant and generous nature. The people in this field do not generate wealth, they collect it and redistribute it. And they redistribute it for the benefit of the people. What people in the field of government are supposed to do is stockpile goods in the event of an emergency, and when there is an emergency, to distribute everything, even to making all of their storage empty. Some of the people in this field really like to study, really like to learn. Their learning tends to be practical, and it tends to be about their field. So they may tend to like studying history and politics or martial arts or about ethics or about justice. They'll fight incessantly for their principles regardless of personal cost. And those with dharmic expertise don't only protect the humans in their domain, but also the land and the animals, particularly non-agricultural land and animals. So the agricultural land is protected by them indirectly through the field of resources, but they will directly protect the non-agricultural land and the wildlife and the people. And those who have dharmic expertise in the field of government will sacrifice everything for the sake of justice, being an honorable person, and the public interest. And they will really sacrifice everything. I mean, people in this field will sometimes literally give their right arm to protect the society. The questions they ask about their work are, is it just, like justice, and is it honorable? So any questions about the field of government? Yes?
An activist, like an environmental activist, might be considered in this field?
If that's their livelihood, if that's how they maintain themselves. Not if that's what they do, a few Saturdays a year.
Why the difference?
Because we're talking here about livelihood. We're talking about career. We're talking about what we do that's our main contribution to society. What we do that is the ideal expression of ourself.
Okay, let's say you're on pension and the whole time and the whole amount of money you sacrifice on this.
Well, people who are on pension are retired, and technically speaking, people on pension don't have a career at all. So, but it's going to be quite common for people who are retired to maybe do some volunteer work that was similar to what they had as their temperament in their livelihood. In fact, we talked about this in the overview, and we'll talk about it again on Friday. One of the ways we can give in charity is to do volunteer work that's similar to our livelihood. So if you work in the field of government as your livelihood, you might also voluntarily give some of your time to promote justice and morals and ethics in the society. And if you're retired, you may also be volunteering some of your time in that way. But if someone's an environmentalist activist as their livelihood, that's how they maintain themselves, then yes, they're in this field. Teachers are not in this field, no. Not if you're a teacher by profession. Although people, I mean, you have somebody who's in the military and they're teaching other people how to use a weapon. You know, you understand? But they're not a teacher. They're an army sergeant who does some teaching. Yes?
Which field do you best fit into?
Oh, that'll be obvious to you later on. No. Yes?
The qualities of governance, is that based on, so these categories are based on like maintaining livelihood. If like a temple president, for example, you know, they're not necessarily earning income from it, but the temple's
Well, you can, it's possible to maintain yourself without getting money or without getting a lot of money. You might be being paid in kind.
Yep.
So you might be being given a house and a car and food and clothing and then a small amount of money rather than just being paid in money, but it's still the way you maintain yourself. As far as the temple president, it depends. So if you have a temple that's just about worship and education, a temple president is a leader in the field of ideas. If you have a temple that's really a community, then that person should be in the field of government. That work is in the field of government, and you should have a person whose temperament is in the field of government. Any other question about the field of government? Okay. And go on to the field of resources. Bless you. So the field of resources is about, oh wait, just a couple of things I forgot to tell you. How could I forget that? Okay, government is also, it is an expansive field. So we looked at how artistry is a satisfied field and a field of honesty. We mentioned how government is a field of diplomacy, but it's also an expansive field. So the people in the government want to protect more people in bigger ways. They're constantly thinking about expansion. All right. I don't know how I forgot to say that. Okay, looking at the field of resources. The field of resources provides the resources for society. They're the only field that does this. They provide all the raw material for food, for clothing, for construction, for medicine. People in other fields may then manipulate that raw material, move it around, change it, but these are the only people that are actually providing it. Now, there's more abstraction in resources than in artistry, but less than in government. Because, like, what makes a good business really varies from one culture to another. You know, should decisions be made, okay, this is an executive top-down decision, or should decisions be made by group collaboration? Should things be fixed just by changing the rules? Right? These sort of questions are answered very differently in Australia and in Japan, you know, or in Sweden and in Germany. There's very different ideas as to what makes a good business or what makes a good worker in this field of resources. Therefore, it's more abstract than artistry, but not as abstract in government because you can much more easily measure the success in this field. This field is the main employer in human society. So the government certainly employs people, ideas certainly employs people, artistry employs people, but your main employers are in the field of resources. So they're not only producing wealth by the customers that they serve, but also by the employees that they maintain. They're also the main payers of taxes, so they're going to pay the biggest quantity of taxes, and they're going to give the biggest quantity of charity, although the generosity mood is in government. In the universal body, they represent the stomach. Now, it's interesting that Srila Prabhupada will often compare the stomach of the body to God. He'll often say, you should serve God just like every part of the body serves the stomach. And when you serve Krishna, then that benefit is then distributed to everyone in the same way as when you feed the stomach, that nutrition spreads throughout the body. So the field of resources is acting as that, as spreading this benefit throughout the universal body. And of course, in the subtle universal body, there are the Manipur chakra. Huh? Any idea of what careers would be in the field of resources? Yes. Farming if you own the farm, not if you go and pick the apples. If you're just picking the apples, you're in artistry. Yes. Businesses, yes. If you're an entrepreneur, yes. Yeah.
Industrial workers?
Well, if you're just working in industry, no, you're in artistry. If you own the industry or you're running the industry, you're managing the industry, you're in resources. Yeah? Bankers, yes, not the teller. The cashier is in artistry. But I don't know how you do it here, but most of the world, there's like tables that you can go and talk to a financial advisor. They're also in resources. Yeah? Marketing? Yes. Yes. Lawyer, no, they're in government. They're in government. The owner of the law firm is almost always also in government. I mean, there might be some situation where someone's running a law firm as a business and the owner of the law firm is just concerned with expansive profit, but that's not generally the case. It might be. That would be a very peculiar arrangement and probably not a very healthy one. That wouldn't be advisable to have a law firm run by somebody with the mentality of the field of resources, or to be run as if it were a business. That would skew things, because then they'd be concerned more with distributing wealth and profit than with justice and morals and ethics. So the head of a law firm should be in government. Yes? Real estate is in resources, yes. Doing what with animals? If they're breeding animals as a business, yeah? Okay, if you just have 1 or 2 cows in your backyard for yourself, that's not a livelihood. But if you actually run like a dairy farm, yes. Any kind of manufacturing, if you're managing the business, yes. If you're running the business, yes. If you're driving the trucks, you're in artistry. Investors, yes. Well, if you're taking care of the forest to protect them, that's government. If you're taking care of the forest as a business where you're harvesting the lumber and replanting trees, that's resources. That's like on a grand scale, like you're harvesting corn or you're harvesting wheat. It depends. If you're a chef and you want to bring beauty and pleasure to the world, and so you have a little cafe, and you're not interested in expansive wealth and profit, then you're in artistry. Resources is about expansive taking care of the world. Yeah? Drug dealers? Drug dealers. So, a criminal activity is a perversion of one of the fields. So you could be a criminal in any of the 4 fields where you're taking that field and you're perverting it into criminality. Pharmaceutical industry, yes.
Let's say you grow weed, which is illegal.
That's criminal activity.
But if it's legal, like in the US?
If you're actually producing medicines, and of course, if you're growing something that's an intoxicant, even if it's legal, then you're violating one of the other principles of career dharma, that your work should be adding real value to the society. I mean, perhaps we could argue that intoxication adds value to the society, but I don't think you'd win that argument. Huh? I somehow, it's not sustainable. Yeah, well, any work that's producing something that harms society is not following career dharma. There are always going to be some people who take intoxication. You're never going to have a society where nobody gets intoxicated. That's not going to happen. But that should be more on the peripheral of society. Well, I really liked it in Wellington. Something that really impressed me in Wellington. There were signs up all over the city center that there was no public drinking of alcohol. They said that if you bought alcohol in a licensed shop, you could transport it to your home. And you could drink in outside areas of restaurants that were licensed to serve alcohol. But otherwise, there was no drinking or distributing of alcohol in any public places in all of Wellington. And I thought, that's really nice. That's recognizing we can't stop it altogether, but we don't have to have it as a main part of our society. I'm not sure what the percentage is, but it's a very high percentage of crimes are committed by people who are under the influence of some sort of intoxicant. Now, as far as medicinally, that's something else. There's a lot of medicines that can also intoxicate people. You can even get intoxicated by antihistamines. I mean, that's not... So producing medicines is something else. That's a legitimate business that has real value. Is that okay? Sorry if you don't like my view on that. Okay. Yes? So then you're talking about something that is actually against Dharma. So you're always going to have some people, he said fishermen. So you're always going to have some people who are going to catch fish and eat fish, like you're always going to have some people that are going to have animals that they slaughter. That you're not going to absolutely prevent that in society, but if someone has that as a business, that's adharmic. Okay, one of the principles is to cherish your field of work. So people in the field of resources are supposed to be getting wealth from the land and the animals, but not by killing them, by protecting them. So in an ideal society, you wouldn't eliminate all fishing and you wouldn't eliminate all animal slaughter, but you would at least eliminate it as a business. That the way most things are going on in the world is a mess. You all noticed that, right? It's a problem. And in order to fix a problem, one has to have some idea of what exactly the problem is. One of the ways in which Ruchira and I felt very gratified by studying about career dharma from the Gita and the Bhagavad Purana is that this system really made crystal clear to us what the problem is and how to fix it. And I put it in two, it's generally two problems, one of two problems or both. Someone's doing work that's not theirs. They're working in the wrong field, which we'll look at tomorrow evening. What happens when you work in the wrong field? Or they're in the right field, but they're not preserving the integrity of that field. They're not following the dharma of that field, which is why we talk about the dharmic expertise of that field. And we have a couple chapters in our book about that. On Friday, I'll talk about that briefly, maybe like for 5 minutes. But even going through what I'm doing right now, looking at the inclination for a field and the dharmic expertise. You could see, we've just covered, right, 2 fields so far as the inclination. If everyone who did work in the field of artistry did it with the kind of dharmic expertise that I described, and everyone working in the field of government did it with the kind of dharmic expertise that I described, you would solve a lot of the world's problems. But you've also got to make sure people are in the right place. Now, I haven't yet described the dharmic expertise of resources. Yeah?
So, let's say somebody who produces computers, is that, I mean, he has the inclination, but he doesn't have dharmic expertise?
Why couldn't he have both?
Because computers is not exactly a resource that necessarily is beneficial to society.
I find my computer to be beneficial.
I heard in class Prabhupada saying that people from art history, you know, they have this science, for example. Science, for example, it's for sense gratification. It's not really for to supply the resources for maintenance of the society. It's more to make sense gratification more sublime, more sophisticated. So,
Well, people in the field of artistry are supposed to provide the sensory pleasures of the society. That's their dharma. If they weren't doing that, our life would be dry. I was just hearing a class that Srila Prabhupada gave. Just this morning I was listening where he was saying, as long as we have the body, we need some gratification of the senses. You know, according to Ayurveda, you'll digest food better if you enjoy it. Did you know that? Your digestion of food depends upon the taste of the food. That's the rasa of the food. Sweet, sour, salty, bitter, pungent, and astringent are the 6 Ayurvedic tastes. And there's an Ayurvedic taste in your mouth and another Ayurvedic taste in your stomach. And like tasteless food is in tamagun. So analogously, the field of artistry is providing all the taste in the food of society. In an ideal society, in an ideal spiritual society, would there be beautiful parks and gardens? I'm asking you. Would there be beautiful parks and gardens?
yes.
Would people have beautiful clothing to wear? Would people have beautiful clothing to wear?
Yes.
Would there be beautiful music and artwork
Yes.
and theater?
Yes.
Would things work well? Would everything be broken in society, or would things be working well? That's all artistry. So the field of artistry is providing all that in society, and they can provide that in a way that's dharmic or not dharmic. And the same with resources. So like Prabhupada said, you know, if there's a typewriter, if there's a dictaphone, we must use it. Now, you could say it's a fine line that does producing computers cause harm to society. But so many things can cause harm to society. I personally really hesitate to say we should all go back to 1700. First of all, I don't think anybody would want to do that, and I don't want to do that. I mean, just being honest, I really don't want to do that. I really don't want to go back to the way people were living in 1700. And I don't think that that's attractive. It may be, and there may be some people who want to do that. My own practical experience is that a lot of people who think they want to do it, try it for a few years, and then say, you know, I really don't want to do this. That's my practical experience over decades, seeing a whole lot of people who thought they wanted to do it. So I've seen personally. Yes, we're going to live just like people lived in 1700, and they go do it, and they go through one bad winter in Europe, you know. And then they're like, nah, I don't think so. So So what Ruchir and I are looking at more are what are the principles of career Dharma, because the details of how that's going to play out is going to change frequently. You're still thinking about this deeply.
I'm wondering, would it be like when we resource things that give excessive sense gratification to society, where is that adharmic, or is that just...
Well, anything that's,
illegal?
you know, anything that's too much of something or the wrong kind is going to cause a problem. And we'll look at on Friday the relationship between the fields, how the fields regulate each other, which I think solves most of these problems that you're talking about. But also, if everyone within the field, see, right now in this class, I'm just talking about the nature of the fields and the temperament of the field. I'm not getting so much into the whole Dharma of the field. I did that yesterday morning, and I'll do that again on Friday afternoon. So my feeling is that a lot of the very valid and important concerns you're bringing up will be more addressed then. It's not possible for me to explain every aspect of everything at one time. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay.
No.
No, it doesn't make sense. Well, I don't know how to do it, and I'll be happy to take instruction on that. But I do have, were you here this morning? No. Okay, so this morning I also went over, I don't have it in this PowerPoint, I also went over the 9 principles. Everybody remember who was here this morning? I went over the 9 principles. So you're talking about principles that I'm not covering right now. They're there, and they're absolutely essential. I'm just... Okay? We will discuss that, Krishna willing, on Friday from 4 to 6. And you'll see we have, in our book, the whole first part of the book is what's your nature? Where do you fit? Second part of the book is how do you use your nature dharmically, which is what you're talking about. People, by the way, aren't as interested in that, and so I don't spend that much time on that in an in-depth class. Most people are primarily interested in who am I and where do I fit. Then how do you have an ideal society, which is also what you're talking about, is in the third part of the book. So I teach those things very briefly in an overview in my classes. But what you're saying is right, and it's part of that. Okay, I need to go on or I'm going to be very late. I'm already probably going to be a little late, but I don't want to be too late. Okay, let's look at the temperament of people in the field of resources. One thing I think that would help you is if you look at what I'm describing as the dharmic expertise in each field, you'll see a lot of that is covered there. So here's the temperament, the first inclination for this field. People who really like to play with wealth or with resources, that's their fun. Huh? They like to stay on top of ways of earning more money. Now, a lot of children like to do things that make money because money represents freedom and autonomy. But we're talking about when that's a person's primary way of thinking. They tend to be ambitious. The Bhagavad Purana says the people in this field are always thirsty. Not for water. They tend to be ambitious and wanting to increase their own wealth. They want to expand. This is a field, like government, of expansion. Tend to be very goal-oriented and not so much process-oriented. Now again, we're looking right now at the inclination. A person may have a sort of a preliminary idea of the flow of resources. Okay, going on to dharmic expertise. These people tend to be systems thinkers of the particular flow of their own work. So I talked about the guy who has this little cardboard shop, so to speak, and repairs thongs. So right down the street, there's a man with a cart, actually a few of them, and on the cart they have goods from all over India and from other countries, and they're paying attention to, I didn't create this slide, so it's not that the details there are relevant. I just wanted to get a picture that gives you an idea. So he's paying attention to, like, okay, when do the pilgrims come? When do the foreigners come? When do this people come? What do they buy at this time? What do they buy at this time? They're aware of the competitors. They're aware of the marketplace. If they're working directly with nature, they're aware of production seasons of trees and plants and of animals. The flows they understand and grasp are of natural resources and money. And they want to redirect these flows to themselves, increase it, make a profit, and spread wealth to the world. So our youngest son is in this field, and he said to me, he was, I don't know, in his mid-20s, he said, Mother, by the time I was like 20, 21, I had already generated more wealth for society than you and my father spent on raising me. And he said, that's how you know. He and his wife have 3 kids. Later he told me in his 30s, he said, the way you know you're a successful parent is your child has generated more wealth for society than you have put into raising them. So people sometimes misunderstand this field. I forgot to ask you about the misunderstandings because I had so many questions. People sometimes misunderstand that the people in this field are greedy, because they have this mood of, I'm going to bring the wealth to myself, make a profit, and expand it. Unlike the field of government where people rush into danger, because both the field of government and resources are fields of expansion and diplomacy. But unlike the field of government where people rush into danger, this is a put your own oxygen mask on first field. These people will not exhaust their stock in a time of difficulty. The people who have dharmic expertise in this field, Prabhupada talks about, they can make money when things are going well and when things are going poorly. They understand how to produce sustainable wealth because they understand that their responsibility is to feed the world in good times and in bad times. They can adjust what products or services they're providing. They can adjust the prices. They can adjust the market, understanding the different flows. They know that they have to save seeds from the harvest to plant the next year, and this is why they never exhaust everything. And this is also why people see those in this field as being unsentimental. Oh, but people are starving. Can't you give them everything? No, I can't give everything. Because if I give everything, I'll feed everybody right now, and next year everybody will starve. In government, they're going to keep supply, and then when there's difficulty, they're going to generously give to everyone. You follow? But in resources, that's not their dharma. Their dharma is they must make sure that they're in a stable position. Like they don't want to give so much charity that they become a recipient of charity. And they want to make sure that they can keep providing these resources to the world. The people in this field will sacrifice everything to preserve the flow of resources with high standards of ethics and morality. And the questions they ask about their work are, is it sustainable and is it regenerative? Now, these don't just apply to the environment, but they apply to the business itself. We should also mention that, like government, this is a field of diplomacy. And we kind of alluded to this previously, that you don't expect advertisements to be honest. And you don't expect in a shop for them to tell you how much profit they're making. Actually, Srila Prabhupada wrote in a purport in the Bhagavad Gita 18th chapter that lying is compulsory in this field, like diplomacy is compulsory in the field of government. All right, questions about field of resources? Yes. Yes, this is the Manipur chakra because this is the stomach of the body. Of the universal body. If you envision the universe as one body, which it is, it's one of Krishna's bodies, so they are the stomach in the universal body. Okay. If you go into a store and they tell you how much they spent for the pipe, you're buying some pipe to fix your plumbing, and they tell you how much they spend and how much profit they're making, would you buy it? Well, then you're a very unusual person. No, seriously, you're a very unusual person. But most people don't think like that. See, the field of artistry, they don't do that. The field of artistry, if you hire a plumber, the plumber buys the pipe and tells you, I spent $50 for this pipe, and I'm also charging you $150 for labor. But if you go into a shop and they said, we bought this pipe for $50 and we're selling it to you for $150, you probably will not buy it. How can you, why so much profit? And what are they going to do? Say, well, okay, my rent for the building is this much, my electrical bill is this much, my water bill is this much, the salaries I have to pay my employees is this much. Do you follow? Even that doesn't work very well. Then you'll start negotiating. Well, what about, why do you have to pay such high salary? Why do you have to do this? What? So then they don't tell you. In fact, they may say, oh, for you, we're having a big sale. So it's a field where if you don't have diplomacy, it doesn't work. They're not going to say, all this steel beam will do is hold up your house. Buy this steel beam. See the beautiful lady holding the steel beam?
Like, I have an example. In my hometown, there is a shop that gives you exactly that detail of prices, and it's quite successful and sustainable.
How big of a shop is it?
Yeah, it's not that big.
Is it a very small shop?
You have everything. It's not small, but it's not a supermarket. It's not a
Well, that would be very unusual, and that tells me probably the people running that shop have the mentality of artistry, not resources. And most likely their view is not to bring wealth to the world, but to bring beauty and support to the world. So there are small shops. They don't usually have a variety of things. They usually are shops that have the particular items that people are making. Like if someone's a potter, they'll have a pottery shop, or they're an artist, they'll have a little art gallery. And they're not profit-minded, but they're not trying to feed the world.
They're focusing on sustainability, regeneration, but not on exploitation of profits.
Profits isn't exploitation. You cannot have a sustainable, regenerative business without profit.
Yeah, but profit exploitation is a different thing. Like
Well, you can be exploitive in any field.
Yeah, that's what it is.
You can be adharmic in any field.
You lie when you want more profit.
You can be exploitive and corrupt in any field. Now, people tend to see the field of government and the field of resources as more exploitive and more corrupt because they are fields of expansion and diplomacy. So there's more of a tendency, if we think about corruption and exploitation, we tend to think about people in government or people in resources because of their expansive diplomatic nature of their field. But if they weren't expansive and diplomatic, they couldn't do the Dharma of their field. Can people be corrupt? Yes, this is exactly what this gentleman was also talking about.
No, it's just about transparency. Like, I don't think it's
But you don't want absolute transparency in resources and government. Suppose your political leaders got up and said, you know, there's only a few minor things I'm going to be able to accomplish if you elect me. It wouldn't work. It just wouldn't work. Or if they went, you know, and to be a spy or to be an undercover police officer, you can't be honest.
well, that's very sad to hear.
No, it isn't sad. Please try to open your mind a little bit. No, just wait a second. Try to open your mind a little bit. The whole point of the four fields is that what is ethical in one field is unethical in another field. Absolute honesty is actually only ethical in one field, which we haven't talked about yet. That's the only field in which absolute honesty is ethical. And with the people in that field are willing to die for absolute honesty. In the other field, it's not completely ethical. Even in artistry, which is a field of honesty. In artistry, you're trying to please the customer or the client. If your client comes in and says, I really like this wedding dress, I like this style, and you think it looks hideous on them, but they like it. You're not going to tell them that. Because your dharma is to please your customer or client, and as long as it's not harming them, you're not going to say anything to them. Absolute ethics is something else. Absolute ethics has to do with other principles of career dharma, such as that everything you're doing, all your work should be honest in terms of you should be charging a fair price for your goods and services. Businesses should charge a fair price. But a fair price has to include a profit if their business is going to be sustainable and regenerative. And generally, they cannot be transparent about that profit, or people wouldn't shop there, and people wouldn't buy from them. All kinds of work should be honest in terms of, again, giving a fair and accurate description of what their goods and services are and the price that they're charging, and paying their employees fairly. There must be that kind of honesty in all four fields. But the absolute honesty, no. If you're going to negotiate with North Korea, you're not going to be able to be absolutely honest. You're going to be a diplomat. And a diplomat means you're using diplomacy. And if you take an absolutely honest person and you send them to be a diplomat with Russia or with North Korea, you're going to start a war. Does that make sense? You know, people who work as undercover police officers or as intelligence officers, their whole life, in a sense, is a lie. But that's necessary for the security of the government. It's necessary for the security and safety of people. There have been government spies for thousands and thousands of years. So there's a certain element of diplomacy that's part of the field of resources and part of the field of government that's not in artistry or ideas. And there's even a part of the field of artistry that doesn't have the kind of honesty of the field of ideas. But I will tell you that people don't always appreciate the total honesty of the field of ideas. So often people in the field of ideas discuss their absolute honesty away from the general public, in language that the general public does not understand. In closed forums with their own internal jargon. Because the absolute honesty of the field of ideas is too much for most people most of the time. And many times people in the field of ideas just have to do this. Because most of the time people don't want to hear absolute honesty. Yes, but you are correct. One of the principles of career dharma, actually our fourth principle, is that it should be ethical work of value, which is also exactly what you're talking about. You're both basically talking about the same thing. That everyone's work should be honest, and everyone's work should be providing real value without harm. However, in order to provide honest, ethical work without harm, in resources and government, you have to use diplomacy. Does this make some sense? Okay. Not to cheat. Not for the purpose of cheating, not for the purpose of exploitation. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah? Any other questions about resources? I find it interesting, I've been teaching this all over the world, that people generally assume that resources is intrinsically corrupt. Whereas without resources, we can't eat. And it just, I run into this all the time. And I think this is because so many people now working in these fields are corrupt. And we're so tired of it. Yes?
If you have the inclination, say, for this field, is it a guarantee that you can become expert in it and then, you know, become successful in your career? Because obviously there'd be so many business people.
Guarantee.
And you might not find...
I'm too old for guaranteeing anything to anybody. My grandson, who I'm traveling with, he says, Grandma, how come whenever I say you're absolutely certain, you say, well, I'm only absolutely certain about a couple things? I don't remember what I was talking to our youngest son about once, but he said, are you sure? And I did, yes, I'm sure. And he said, are you 100% sure? And then I said, what does he know that I don't know? Guaranteed. Well, you certainly have everything on your side. Bless you. So there is an assumption here, and Ruchira and I spent a long time, talking about how to present this in our book for people who don't have a basic belief in a God, or don't have a basic belief in the fact that the universe is benevolent. So however you want to understand the divine, if you want to understand the divine as the universal body, as the great, energetic, undifferentiated, as the Father and Creator, or as a supreme playful being, we understand that it's benevolent. In other words, that the universe itself, the planet itself, wants to be healthy, wants to be functional. And we each have our own natural place. So when we go to our natural place and we act in our natural place well, we are going to get support from the whole, because it's the desire of the whole. It's like it's your desire that every cell in your body is healthy and in the right place, right? You don't want your brain cells migrating to your lungs or to your stomach or something, and you want each cell performing optimally. And so when your cells are happy and doing their job, you are supporting that. So if we're doing what we're meant to do, if we're the best expression of ourselves and doing that in a way that's dharmic, yes, we will get help from our source. However, whether you understand the Supreme Divine as Krishna or whether you understand the Supreme Divine as the universe, we're going to get help from our source. Is there a guarantee? That's a bit of a stretch. But you're way on the likelihood side. You've got this super high probability. Just from a logical and reasonable standpoint. Is that all right? Okay, we're going to go on to the field of ideas. So the field of ideas provides all the wisdom, guidance, truth, and education to society. Research, study, counseling, therapy. Now remember we talked about how that the field of government is providing the leadership for society, but there's leaders in all four fields? So in the same way, the field of ideas is providing the intelligence of society, but there are intelligent people in all four fields. There are very intelligent people, lawyers, judges are highly intelligent. There are highly intelligent business people. There are highly intelligent musicians and athletes. So it's not that all the intelligence is in the field of ideas. However, most of the intellectuals are in the field of ideas. But not everyone in the field of ideas is an intellectual. Just like if it's raining, there has to be clouds. But if there's clouds, it may not be raining. Okay? If you're an intellectual, you are almost definitely in the field of ideas. However, if you are in the field of ideas, you may not necessarily be an intellectual. And you may not necessarily be one of the most intelligent people in society either. But the field of ideas is providing the intelligence and the vision of society. Now, most people in the field of ideas communicate truth and wisdom through language, many through mathematics, and some through the fine arts. So some small percentage of musicians, artists, actors, dancers are actually in ideas. And the difference is sometimes subtle. Like, is a person's main way they want to contribute to the world truth and wisdom, and they're using drama to do that, and the aesthetics of the drama are secondary, or is their main desire to spread pleasure and beauty and function to society, and whatever truth they're giving is secondary? I mean, people in the field of artistry want to be inspirational. They want people to be elevated by the sensory pleasure that they're providing. They're not trying to provide degraded sensory pleasure, but their main motive is pleasure and beauty and support. whereas in ideas, it's truth and wisdom. So again, this can be very subtle. Now, there are many people in ideas who use music or drama or art to assist them, but some do it primarily. That is a few. It's unusual, but it is there. Ideas represents the brain of the universal body and the universal subtle body, the Visuddha chakra and the Agya chakra. So what careers do you think are in the field of ideas? Professors, yes. Priests, yes. Yeah, any scientist. Teachers, yes. Yes. Yoga teachers, if it's holistic and they're teaching you not just exercises, yes. Like different parts of medicine, but again, only if they're also educating you and training you in health. If it's just completely mechanical, they're in artistry. But if they're actually giving you guidance for health and wisdom, then ideas, yes.
Motivational speakers.
Depends what they're trying to motivate you to do. So you have some motivational speakers who are just simply trying to help you to become more profitable in your business. So they may have some leadership position in the field of resources. Scientists, yes. Yes. Philosophers, yes. Journalists and filmmakers, it depends. If you're, and this goes back to your other question about journalism. If you're a war correspondent in Israel or in the Ukraine, yes, you're in ideas. If you're the gossip columnist, no. If you're part of government putting out propaganda, no. Yes? No, entrepreneurs are in resources. Yes. Some artists. Yes, there are some artists where their main focus is to bring truth and wisdom to society, and they're doing it through the visual arts, and the aesthetics of the art are secondary. That's unusual, but there are some. It's a very small percentage, but there are some. Advisors to what about what? So there are definitely people in the field of ideas who advise government or who advise business, but you could be a business consultant where you go in and give advice about, well, how do you take advantage of the market, and how do you deal with your competitors, and how do you make a better profit, and how do you get your employees more motivated. So that's a leader in resources rather than a person in ideas. Yes? Preachers, if it's your livelihood, yes. Yes. Counselors, therapists, yes. All engineers are in artistry. Yes. A monk technically doesn't have a career. And let me see if I have that here or to progress. No, and we'll talk about that soon. Okay, what are the prejudices or criticisms that people have about the field of ideas? Yeah? Brutal honesty, yeah? Yeah? What? Make-believe, yes. So most people think that a lot of the work in the field of ideas is useless, which is one of the reasons it can be hard to be maintained in the field of ideas. So a lot of people see, what's the practicality of researching the feeding habits of some endangered bear? Right? So many times it's seen as make-believe or useless. And what's another criticism of this field? Irreplaceable? Oh, it's interesting you say that. I was just thinking about how, we used to worry about technology replacing people in artistry, and now we're worrying about technology replacing people in ideas. That they're just replaceable, that you could replace them with AI and ChatGPT. What's another criticism of this field? Arrogant, thank you. So, because this field is providing the vision for society and giving unvarnished truth, and because the majority of society's intellectuals are in this field, and because often they'll discuss unvarnished truth just among themselves in their own jargon, because they know that people won't be able to take it. So they're often seen as arrogant. Okay, let's look at the temperament of people in the field of ideas. So the inclination for the field of ideas, people that love to play with language or mathematics in pursuit of truth, often tend to be insatiably curious, wanting to know what's true and what's real, often good at breaking ideas and projects into smaller components. They can often see the pattern in ideas and relationships and systems. Often they like to teach others. Often they like to research. Sometimes they like to be very introspective and do a lot of thinking or a lot of meditation or a lot of worship. The Dharmic expertise in this field, peacefulness, self-control, austerity, purity, tolerance, honesty, knowledge, wisdom, and religiousness. Satisfaction. So this is again a field of satisfaction, like the field of artistry, but it's a different kind of satisfaction. Simple straightforwardness. Like the field of artistry, this is a field of honesty, but it's a different kind of honesty. Instead of being honest about the price of the pipe and differentiating that from labor, it's honest about truth and wisdom that people might not want to hear. Like, you have cancer, you have to stop smoking. You have to lose weight. I don't want to hear that. Another dharmic quality is mercy, and that will be very important in tomorrow's class. So those with dharmic expertise may be dedicated to helping others mentally and emotionally by helping them understand how life works. They may be dedicated to understanding themselves. They may be dedicated to helping other people physically gain knowledge and wisdom through medicine. They like to collect knowledge, understand it, use it, analyze it, share it. Sometimes they live in their heads and aren't really so much aware of what's going on in the world. Now, some of the people in this field study minutia, like the eating habits of some endangered bear, and some are studying the whole picture of reality. Now, you're going to find a lot of systems thinkers in this field, as you will in government and resources. But the systems thinkers in government and resources are trying to control those systems, and ideas are trying to understand them for guidance. In the field of ideas, people are also often seen as unsentimental because they feel themselves kind of separate from society and life. They feel themselves to be something like a sports commentator who's watching the game and commenting on it but not really living it. And they have this basic sense of satisfaction and simplicity. They like to live a life where they're going to be balanced and detached, and they don't really have this kind of expansive, goal-driven activity that's much more evident in government and in resources. Now, the satisfaction in artistry is if you have basic creature comforts. You've got a nice place to live, loving family, good food, nice clothing. You're treated with dignity and respect. Your customers and clients are pleased with you. You're compensated fairly. But in ideas, what you're satisfied with is the mental and intellectual stimulation. And you might not even notice so much where you live or what food you're given or any of those sort of things. You may have less of an interest in them, which actually helps in having objective truth. In the field of ideas, people are willing to sacrifice their life for the sake of objective truth. You can think about reporters who will go to jail rather than revealing their sources. Or war correspondents who are willing to be on the front line like a combatant in order to give truth back to society about what's really going on. Or people who are willing to be persecuted and tortured and killed for speaking proper philosophy and truth. Yes? That's a big problem in society today. So she's saying that many times teachers today are repressed and not able to speak objective truth. This is often because people in the field of government or people in the field of resources are controlling the field of ideas, which is a perversion. If people in the field of government try to control the field of ideas, they will try to politicize knowledge. If people in the field of resources control the field of ideas, they will try to make a profit out of knowledge. If people in the field of artistry control the field of ideas, they will try to sensualize knowledge. They'll bring the natural Dharma of their field into a place where it doesn't belong. So the field of ideas is supposed to be very, very independent in order to keep that detachment and objectivity. Then the questions that they ask about their work are, is it true and is it wise? Yes?
What about satisfaction? Like if somebody is looking for the truth, it's a constant search, and maybe you're not all.
Oh, you're getting to my next thing. That's about the monks too.
But what about the satisfaction?
They're satisfied with the search for truth, with the mental, intellectual, inner satisfaction. Yeah, people in the field of ideas, their satisfaction is more on the subtle level. Rather, in artistry, it's more on the external level. Yes? You're not going to find both in the same person. People in the field of ideas need some looking after often. People in the field of ideas need some looking after. Because they'll often live in their heads. So they often need a little bit of looking after. But when we do talk about cherishing your sources of wealth, which we'll talk about again on Friday, our main source of wealth is our body and mind, and we should make sure that whatever we're doing in our work, that we don't do things that are unhealthy physically or mentally. So if you're so much living in your head that you're just living on donuts, then you're not really cherishing your sources of wealth. But there is that tendency in the field of ideas. There definitely is that tendency to not care so much about the physical aspect of life. To have this detachment. That it has to be balanced by cherishing your field. Like, okay, my body is also divinely given, my life, everything, I have to take care of those things. But it's not so much their interest. They'll do it as a service to take care of things, but it's not their source of satisfaction, shall we say. Yes? You are. You all are. You're giving me a place to stay. You're giving me something to eat. You're working hard for the farm, and the farm's going to pay my airfare. You're going to pay my airfare, right? No, I'm just... Yeah, okay. I mean, everyone's taken care of by God. Everybody. If you're a farmer, you're very aware that you're being taken care of by God. Everybody's being taken care of by God. But people in ideas tend to not have so much interest in making money at all. Like in artistry, they're not that interested in profit and money. They just want to be happy, but they want to have a basic dignified life in exchange for their goods or services. If people in artistry aren't paid fairly for their goods and services, they're not going to be happy. Or if they don't have basic creature comfort. So they care up to that point, but they're not expansive. And people in ideas hardly even care up to that point. So there has to be an extra effort. Okay, I've got to make sure that I cherish my body, and I cherish my people that I work with, and I cherish these things because they're all given by God. And there needs to be a little bit of concern from society in general, especially people in ideas who do highly theoretical work that most of the people in the other fields just think is stupid. That's hard. If you're in ideas and you're doing work that people can see, like, you're a teacher in a school, it's a little easier. But if you're researching, the intricate Sanskrit poetry of Srila Rupa Goswami as compared to the poetry of Kavi Karnapur, then it's a lot harder for people to feel that they should take care of you. So it's one of the challenges of the field of ideas. And in a perfect society, there's a general understanding that society needs people like that. That the practical help that comes out of the field of ideas is based on the theoretical research in the field of ideas. Like before Ruchira and I could write this book about practically how to find the right job and be happy in the job, we first had to understand the theory of the whole thing. You follow? It took us 6 years altogether to do that. We had to understand the theory, we had to understand the principles and how it fit together and how it worked together. Depends what you're an author of. So if you're writing romance novels and detective stories, or if you're writing the biography of, I don't know, who's a famous, Tom Cruise or something, it doesn't have to be fiction, here it could be nonfiction. You're in what? Artistry. Depends what you're writing, like journalists. All right. Any other questions on ideas? Okay, are there some people who don't have careers? Yes. And Ruchira and I call these people commensals. That's a biological term. These little fish are commensals. A commensal neither hurts nor helps. They eat at the same table. They kind of live on the outside of society in terms of career. So all children are commensals. Right? You're going to school, you're learning your career, you're being trained. Retired people are commensals. They're no longer working. Now, retired people may still be contributing their knowledge to society, but they're not actively earning a livelihood. And very, very old people who are preparing for death. And then, of course, people who are disabled or handicapped in some way and who can't work. And you have some people who are perpetual students. So that's what we're talking about, monks. So this is true not only for religious seekers, you know, people who spend their whole life as a monk and never have a career. This can also be true academically. Like I have a friend, I met her when I was in Zurich, and she said, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. She's like 38. She said, my father just passed away, and he was the one maintaining me my whole life while I kept getting more and more degrees. So she has a Juris Doctor degree, she's a lawyer, she has like 3 master's degrees, 2 PhDs. She's a perpetual student. She says, I guess now I'm going to have to find a job. And you have some people, I had a cousin like that they just study. Yeah? In traditional Jewish society, that does not have a renounced or celibate order, they always encourage 1 or 2 people in every village to be perpetual students and not to have any kind of career. And it was considered a good deed, you know, to marry your child to a person like that. And they were then maintained by the village. What do you think might be the benefit of having 1 or 2 people in every village who are perpetual students? Huh? They can look at the big picture. They'd also be a living encyclopedia. So before you could talk to your phone, right, and just ask Siri or Google or whatever what the price of wheat is in Tasmania and get an answer in 2 seconds, it was useful to have a living encyclopedia in your village, someone who just studied, even though they didn't actively contribute to the society. We also sometimes have people like this who are, they tend to be nomadic. They generally don't have a family, and they just pick up some odd jobs to earn some extra cash as they travel around, but they don't really have a career. They kind of live on the periphery of society, and they tend to be just seekers. It's already 6:03, and I have a few other things I really want to cover, and then you can ask. We'll also have a lot more time on Friday when I go over the overview again for more discussions in general. Okay, so Krishna says here, right, that there are these 4 fields, and that our nature cannot be repressed. So how are we going to find out our nature? So we looked in each of the 4 fields, remember, at inclination and dharmic expertise. Now, because our nature cannot be repressed, our inclination before we're trained in our dharma may come out in a way that is troublesome. So in our book, we give a few examples of this. These are all true examples. So there was this one guy in school. always doing this in his classes. Stop it. Go to the principal's office, right? Whole time he's in school. And finally, when he was 10 years old, one of his teachers said, stay after class. Oh, no, I'm in trouble again. He said, no, you're not in trouble. And what did the teacher give him? Yes, he actually became a world-famous drummer. Another girl who was always getting in trouble in school, jumping out of her seat, running around the room. And the teachers finally had a conference, the teachers, the counselors, the parents. They said, I think your kid has ADHD. She needs to be medicated. And one of the teachers said, let's try something. They put her in a room by herself, turned on some music. She started to dance. He said, she's not sick, she's a dancer. She became also a world-famous dancer and a world-famous choreographer. She was the choreographer for some of the top musicals in America on Broadway. Now, one devotee child that I know, when he was growing up, was always getting into trouble. Stop minding other people's business. Mind your own business. But that's not fair. Why are you doing that? They're breaking the rules. Be quiet. Mind your own business. His teachers, his parents, his siblings. Mind your own business. But the rules over there, and they should be doing that. And why are you allowing this? And why are you allowing that? Then when he was like 18, he went to Poland on Indra Swami's Polish tour. He was the second in charge of security for the big Polish tour. And they said he was one of the best leaders that they ever had. Now, when I was teaching this to high school students in America, one of my students said, I'm always getting in trouble for thinking. And I asked his mother, is that true? And she said, oh, yeah, actually. She said, I'll often say to him, what are you doing? I'm thinking. Well, stop thinking and do something practical. Okay? So what do you think I got in trouble for when I was 3 years old in preschool? Well, I've always gotten in trouble for talking, but not specifically there. Yeah? Who was I helping to do what? Yes, I was teaching the teachers when I was 3 years old. So the teachers came to complain to my parents, and they said, your child is a real problem because instead of playing with the other kids, she's always coming to us and say, see that girl over there? You really need to teach her this like that, and you should be teaching this kid like that. And so I was told the whole time I was growing up, stop teaching. Especially by my mother, my teachers, stop teaching. And so I thought that teaching was something evil in myself that I had to eradicate. Now these examples are one of the reasons why if someone says, what are you good at? Like if someone had asked me when I was 13, 14, what are you good at? Would I have said teaching? No. It wasn't until I was 24 and I met my mentor, Jyotirmayi, and she trained me in the Dharma of teaching and the craft of teaching that I realized, it only took about 2 weeks, oh my goodness, I'm a teacher. And one of the things that I've done in my life and my career is teach teachers. So I often go to schools and I train teachers and I train principals. I wrote a 500-page book on how to run a school. Now I'm very fortunate my teachers and my parents did strongly encourage me in study and research and writing and public speaking, but somehow or other not in teaching. So our values, the research shows that our values are evident at least by age 13. And I'd say in many cases it's before that, but at least by 13, our basic values in one of these 4 dharmas is very evident. Like with our son who's in the field of resources, when he was 7 years old, he started his own business selling office supplies to the other kids in the school. And when he was 9, he started a business making fresh squeezed orange juice icicles, and then he went from there to cheesecake and pizza. And before he was 20, he was actually the second in charge managing an international textile company. Then he was managing a prasadam food company when he was in his 20s. So these tendencies, these dharmas, are generally evident if we know what to look for. If we know what to look for it. And some of you have talked about, I have my basic nature, but I've been criticized for my nature, or I've even been traumatized about my nature. And this is a real problem in modern society. We have quite a bit in the book about what to do if that's been your circumstance. If your parents have pushed you, or your society, or your friends, or whatever, have pushed you in a situation that was not best for you. So it's 6:08, so I've squeezed really 2 classes into one. I only had 4 slots here instead of 5. So each of these classes I normally teach in 2 hours, and I taught So normally this is a 4-hour class. I taught in 2 hours. So it was a little compressed. Tomorrow we will be going into what happens when you go into the wrong field. And discussing that, I think the kind of things that you brought up especially about what's beautiful in one place becomes ugly in another place. And you can't judge the Dharma of one field by the Dharma of another field, and what harms we cause to ourselves and to society when we do someone else's work. And then on Friday, we'll be looking at all 9 principles, again in brief, and we'll have quite a bit of more time for discussion on Friday. So thank you very, very much. Anything good here is from my spiritual master. Anything bad here is mine. Don't even blame my co-author. So please just take the good and leave aside the bad. If you're interested, we do have some more copies of the book, and I'd be happy to sign it for you. If you would like to do some exercises in the book related to what we did this morning and this afternoon, Appendix A has exercises in recognizing the prosperity types and recognizing the fields. And then the answers are also in the book with explanation. Then Appendix B is where you can do some self-introspection and try to look at, okay, what's my tendency in terms of the prosperity types and what's my tendency in terms of the fields. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Yeah.